Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Today we are unpacking a totally fascinating lecture from July 29th, 1990. It's called Living in the Eternal Now. Now, if you've ever felt like, there just aren't enough hours in the day or you're constantly racing against a ticking clock, you are absolutely in the right place. We're going to fundamentally shift your entire perspective of time. We're going to tear down this idea of time as a rigid physical ruler and rebuild it as a highly malleable, multidimensional asset that you can actually multiply. We'll be looking at some incredibly powerful frameworks from the source material that treat time not as something you just passively consume, but as something you actively construct. Okay, let's dive right into this. Here's the architectural blueprint of today's framework so you know exactly where we're headed. First, we'll break away from clock time. Second, we'll increase time density. Third, we'll expand time area. Fourth, we'll calculate life's total sum, or time volume. And finally, we'll talk about living in the eternal now. All right, part one. Breaking away from clock time. To start, we kind of have to unlearn a universal constant that we've all been taught since childhood, this idea that everybody gets an equal 24 hours. Well, the source material completely challenges that. It points out that certain indigenous tribes across the globe operate perfectly fine without this restrictive concept of clock time. They mark time by natural events, when the rice ripens or when the sun hits a specific mountain ridge. For them, life is just a continuous present. And this brilliantly illustrates the paradigm shift we need to make, moving from clock time to subjective time, or value time. The lecture argues that looking at time like a rigid ruler on a desk is a total illusion. Time is entirely subjective. It holds unique value based on how we experience it. In fact, the source points out that this was the fatal flaw in Karl Marx's economic theory, because he assumed all labor hours hold an equal standardized value. But time isn't flat, right? It inherently contains different levels of value depending entirely on how it's used. Moving on to part two, increasing the density of time. This is our vertical axis. Now, what's really interesting about this is that if time is a subjective container of value, then it isn't just a consumable resource like, say, gasoline in your car. It is an asset. And just like financial capital, time can actually be invested, compounded, and multiplied into tens of thousands of times its original value. Consider the mathematical metaphor the speaker uses here. Imagine you have a great idea and you spend 1 hour explaining it to a friend over coffee. You've generated maybe an hour's worth of value. But if you take that exact same 1 hour of effort and deliver it from a stage to 6,000 people, what happens? You haven't just spent an hour. You have quite literally generated 6,000 hours of value in a single sweep. Your 1 hour of clock time just became 6,000 hours of value time. You've instantly become incredibly rich in time. And the crazy thing is, the multiplication doesn't stop there. The lecture breaks down how utilizing technology and building an organization acts as a massive time multiplier. Step one is speaking to the crowd. But step two, record that lecture on video or tape. Suddenly, that exact same 1 hour reaches 60,000 people. Step three is publishing it as a book and training instructors to teach it worldwide. According to the speaker, actually traveling to reach 60,000 people individually would normally take 20 days of nonstop effort. But by utilizing systems and technology, those 20 days of work are completely compressed into just 2 days of highly dense foundational work. You are literally saving 18 days of your life just by increasing your time density. Another absolutely crucial way to increase density is through the Pareto principle, the famous 80-20 rule. The lecture explains that out of a typical 10-hour workday, 80% of your actual tangible results come from just 2 hours of vital tasks. So if you're smart about it, you focus intensely on those 2 hours, and you delegate the remaining 8 hours of standard tasks to others. Then, the person you delegated to applies the exact same rule downwards, right? They do their top 20% and delegate the rest. This creates an exponential, almost infinite chain of time creation. It's exactly how a simple family-run mom-and-pop shop can successfully scale into a massive trillion-yen enterprise over a few decades. They didn't magically get more clock time, they engineered massive time density. All right, part three, expanding the area of time. This is the horizontal axis. So density is amazing, but it's really only one dimension. It's just the depth. If you just repeat the exact same highly dense work tasks every single day of your life, you are still only building a one-dimensional existence. To explain expanding the horizontal area of time, the speaker uses an incredibly powerful metaphor, the metaphor of the walls. Imagine your daily routine. If you direct all your focus onto one single discipline, it's like sitting in a room and staring endlessly at one single wall. I mean, sure, you know that wall intimately. But if you take some of that compressed time we just freed up and direct your focus to different, diverse interests, you are suddenly turning your head. you realize the room has 4 walls. You fundamentally expand the area of your time by engaging in multiple disciplines throughout the very same day. And just look at how these different activities compound over time. Someone who works 8 hours a day gets standard career progression, but let's say they use their freed up time to read for an hour, practice art for an hour, and play sports for an hour. Over 5 to 10 years, these aren't just little hobbies anymore. They are entirely new networks and skill sets. The lecture gives a fantastic example of this. Maybe 5 years down the line, a major business deal comes up. Instead of spending a full year doing cold outreach and just struggling to get a meeting, you realize the key decision maker is someone from your amateur sports club. A casual 2-minute phone call suddenly accomplishes what would normally take an entire year. That is the sheer power of expanding your time area. Which brings us to part 4, life's total sum, creating the 3D construct of time volume. So the crucial point is this. We're synthesizing these vertical and horizontal axes to move from a flat 2D plane into a fully realized 3D construct of our lives. According to the source material, this concept of time volume is the ultimate, unarguable mathematical formula that measures the true impact and worth of a human life. It is literally calculated by taking your time density, so the depth of the value you create, and multiplying it by your time area, the diverse breadth of your activities. To put that into perspective, let's contrast the two ways of living. On one side, we have a life dictated purely by the clock. In this scenario, an 80-year lifespan simply feels like 80 years. It's visually monotonous, it's predictable, and it is totally bound by the calendar. But on the other side, we have a life of compounded time volume. Because this person focused on multiplying their value through systems and diversifying their interests, their 80 earthly years effectively generated the impact, the value, and the lived experience of 8,000 or even 10,000 years. I mean, wow. They haven't just lived a long life, they have lived a massive life. Finally, part 5, living in the eternal now. Now we arrive at the philosophical and spiritual punchline of the source material, and it's really important to note how the lecture ties this incredibly intense productivity framework into a much broader cosmic perspective. The lecture explicitly posits a 100% certainty of an afterlife, suggesting that the human soul's ultimate mission is continuous learning and working to create a utopia right here on Earth. Now, as an explainer, we're just impartially reporting what the source says, but the logic applied here is undeniably fascinating. The argument is that if you understand your life has a distinct, overarching purpose, it acts as a massive time saver. It drastically cuts down on the aimless, wandering, trial and error phases of life. However, the source gives a very strict warning alongside this. You absolutely must not use this spiritual knowledge as an excuse to escape earthly reality. Instead, the lecture strongly urges the audience to, quote, turn the earthly present into golden time. The core takeaway isn't to just sit around waiting for a spiritual realm. Actually, it's the exact opposite. It's to budget your finite earthly hours with supreme care. You have to treat this current existence as the ultimate proving ground. Treat your time as an active investment budget, not a passive consumable, because every single day is an opportunity to forge that golden time. And that brings us to the end of our explainer today. We've completely shifted from the ticking hands of a physical clock to a rich 3D geometry of time. So I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought based on everything we've unpacked. If the true measure of your life is a volume calculated by density and area, how are you going to budget your 24 hours today to live in the eternal now? Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive, and I highly encourage you to go out and start expanding your time today.